It's safest not to look where you put your feet.
Really? Is that real?
This is one of the 25-meter dishes of the Very Large Array. And this is us climbing inside one of those dishes to go up on top of the primary antenna of this behemoth of a radio telescope. This is me actually walking on a freaking radio telescope. The dish, again, as I said, is 25 meters in diameter. The Very Large Array is located near the small town of Socorro in New Mexico and sits on a flat plateau at an altitude of up 7,000 feet above the sea level. The dishes are arranged in a Y configuration, and depending on the time of the year, these 230 tons dish are moved from one place to the other using this massive transponder on literal railway tracks. There are 4 configurations from A to B to C and D, each having the different dish separation. When the dishes are stretched apart at A configuration, you see the most detail, and when the dishes are closed, you see the least detail. Together combined, they make beautiful radio images such as the Hercules A radio galaxy, which is about 2.1 billion light years away from us. Radio telescope comes in various shapes and sizes, as you can see here, but they all work in pretty much the same way. In order to explain how radio telescopes work, I flew 3,500 kilometers from Kingston, Canada to the VLA in New Mexico, so consider subscribing if you found this useful. So the radio light from a source is reflected off the primary reflector onto the secondary reflector. This on the dish on top of which I'm standing is the primary reflector, and that on top, that hollow part now filled up, is the secondary reflector of the radio telescope. When the dish is pointed at the source, all of the waves constructively interfere and create a bright signal, whereas when the dish is pointed away from the source, the waves no longer constructively interfere and create a weak signal. The actual sensitive area of the telescope that it can see on the sky is also called the primary beam. See as the source passes through the primary beam. When the source is on the primary beam, you see a sharp response. When it's away, you see a flat response. Hence, unlike traditional cameras, radio telescopes act as single pixel cameras. They just record the intensities on a single pixel of the sky and stitches it together to make an image. After the radio waves are reflected off the secondary reflector, they fall into the primary antenna. This antenna is literally the one piece of wire that transforms the oscillations of the radio frequency to raw voltages. Okay, now what do we do with these raw voltages? Well, first and foremost, these raw voltages are passed through the amplifier, in which the signals are amplified or which the strength is increased. Next, they are passed through the mixing chain. The mixer basically mixes it with another frequency and decreases the frequency of our main signal so that we can digitize the signals easily. Next, as I said, the signals are digitized, which means the analog signals are changed into digital signals. After that, they are just recorded onto discs. But different dishes are sensitive to different frequencies. The VLA dishes, for example, are sensitive to frequencies between 1 gigahertz to 50 gigahertz, whereas on the other hand, the chime dishes in Penticton, British Columbia are sensitive to 400 to 800 megahertz. VLA dishes have a smooth surface, but not all telescopes are smooth. The GMRT dishes, for example, in India, have a meshy, gritty surface. And these dishes, well, they don't even look like radio telescopes. So what's going on? So high frequency or short wavelengths actually passes through those really fine meshes, whereas longer frequency waves gets reflected off that surface. So if your incoming wave is actually comparable to the meshiness or how gritty your surface is, it'll actually pass through it. Whereas if the wavelength is longer, it will not care. It'll just treat as the surface as a whole and get reflected off. So the rule of thumb is if your minimum wavelength that you're observing needs to be 16 times sigma, where sigma is the surface error RMS. For example, for the IRAM 30 meters, the minimum wavelength it observes is 0.8 millimeters. So the surface smoothness is 55 micrometers, which means that the dish has to be smoother than 55 micrometers. That's insane levels of smoothness.
The subreflector, like we saw back down on the ground, is being overhauled at the moment. So that's why it's giant and empty. But normally the subreflector should focus the light down onto the feed horns, which if you'd like to come up this little ladder over here, don't climb all the way up, you can just like check them out, onto the different feed horns that we have up here. And they have these nice Teflon sheets over them to keep water and ice and frogs. I've been told apparently frogs have gotten in them before. Someone pointed out these are warmers to melt the snow and ice off the tops of the feed horns. Now, feed horn is
the feed horns are basically these tube-like structures, this conical cone tube-like structures from where the wavelengths, after hitting the subreflector, actually enters the telescope. Feed horn is actually guiding the radio light to fall inside the detectors. For the VLA, the concept is, since they're observing different frequencies, they have different sized feed horns, as you can see in this video. So you can think those feed horns as color filters on a projector. So by spinning the wheel of the projector, you can select the different colors that you can project out on a screen. Similarly, VLA has these different structures of feed horns, and each of these feed horns are sensitive to different bands of frequencies. The larger ones, as you guessed right, are sensitive to large wavelengths or really small frequencies, lower frequencies. And the smaller feed horns, you guessed that right again, are sensitive to really high frequencies or short wavelengths. Right below the primary dish is the receiver room. Inside the receiver room, you can see all of the feed horns. These are the same feed horns that I just explained before, the circular things on top of the telescope dish.
so that the interference that the computers produce inside of them doesn't leak out into the rest of the system here. You can actually look up and see where that mylar surface is. As the heat needs to get bled out of these, it radiates. It's basically a closed cycle refrigerator that compresses, and then it exchanges the heat after it's been compressed into one of these lines. And there's another refrigerator inside that one that uses helium. So it's a two-stage.
At a very fundamental level, the electronic noise is actually coming out of the random thermal motions of the electrons just whizzing around inside the electronics. So what can you do to reduce the motions of the electrons? Well, the easiest way is to sort of cool down your electronics. And that is why you actually need to cool down the electronics of the receiver side in order to make your telescope sensitive. Next, moving down from the receiver room, we come across the massive motors and the gears that are responsible for turning this 25-meter dish weighing several hundreds of tons in both azimuth and elevation, as you can see from these animations. There's something particularly beautiful about watching radio telescopes moving in unison together. Next, all of the signals from the individual 27 dishes are fed into this one giant building, which is the control center, which monitors, controls, and mixes all of these signals together for the VLA. All of these wires are fiber optic wires bringing the signal from the telescopes into the super powerful computers, which actually correlates the signals. This is an exclusive view inside the control center of the Very Large Array. These individual panels are actually giving us the live status of each of the radio telescopes. Okay, now how does it all actually work? How are all of these signals coming from all of the telescope dishes mixed together? So all of the signals are correlated inside the software-based DIFX correlator. DIFX stands for Distributed Frequency Transform. Let's understand what happens. So as the signals from all of the dishes are fed into this correlator, the signals are actually time-varying signals. So there are noisy time-varying signals. All the signals, I mean, coming from the patch of the sky that you're observing. Next, the DIFX correlator does a fast Fourier transform, which means it just picks up the most sensitive frequency components from that signal, from that time signal, and picks up the frequency components. Next, it just matches the signals against each other, and if you get a perfect match, they're multiplied and averaged together. What that does is it highlights the strong features of the signal, makes it more stronger, and reduces the overall noise. So thereby, you're basically emulating a big dish by observing the signals at multiple smaller dishes. Remember, when the signals hits those dishes, one dish will see the signal slightly earlier than the other. So if you can calculate how long it takes for the other dish to see, which is not difficult as you can see from this diagram, so what you could end up doing is you can emulate a large dish by artificially introducing those delays in the signal chain processing. How, in a nutshell, how the VLA combines all of those signals coming from all the 26 to 27 dishes together to make such gorgeous astronomical radio images. And the best part is it can do across a huge band of frequencies. Overall, I had a ton of fun visiting the VLA site, all of the astronomers and the engineers on the site, getting a tour on top of the radio dish and actually seeing and learning all of the functionalities that is used in a radio telescope. This has been an enriching experience, and I hope I have been able to put that out in a simplified way in front of all of you. If you are new to this channel, I am Mayukh. I make astronomy and space related content here on this channel. If that sounds fun, please consider subscribing, and I will catch you guys in the next one really soon.